Recently on the channel I painted a Moria Goblin, and I wanted to make some Goblin inspired terrain. Lately my brother has got me back into playing my favourite ever PC game, Battle for Middle-earth. Whilst playing I stumbled across the perfect thing to make to go with my
Goblins, man! With haste.
In order to make the Goblin Lair, I started with a base, and for this I began by making a template. I wanted to be able to fit 4 goblins inside the lair, so I started by drawing around the bases. I had already decided that I wanted the rocks for the lair to be roughly 1 inch thick, so it would work well if the base was 1.5 inches wide. I set a compass to this measurement and drew around the shape I had drawn for the inside of the lair. Then added an entrance that was wide enough for 2 goblins. Cut out the template and then transferred it to 3mm hardboard. Using a knife I roughly chamfered the outside edges of the base, similar to how I did in the Making Ruins 2.0 video. The base was then ready to be built on. For the rocks I used the XPS foam offcuts from Making the Hills video. I used a hot wire cutter to half the thickness of the foam down to roughly 1 inch. Then I cut it all into rough blocks to begin shaping into the rocks I'll be using for the lair. To do this I used a hot wire cutter and took random bits off the blocks to make them look as though they had been hewn with goblin tools. Then, once happy with the shape, it's just a case of sticking them to the base. When you do it, use a hot glue gun. I didn't have one, so use PVA, but this massively slowed down the build. My first attempt ended up looking like an igloo, and was way too orderly looking for a goblin build, so before it had fully dried, I pulled it apart and started again. This time going for more of a stone wigwam looking build. Once happy with the overall shape and having filled the bigger gaps with smaller rocks, I mixed up some all-purpose filler with some PVA glue. This helped it to spread and stick to the foam better. Then from the inside I filled all the gaps. Once this was dry, I mixed up equal parts of PVA and water, and then made a 50-50 mix of that and brown acrylic paint. I coated the entire piece with that to seal it and add a base colour. To make this terrain piece work with the pieces I've already made on the channel, I started by painting the rocks similar to how I did the latest ruins, mixing in some light grey to the brown and randomly stippling and dry brushing this all over. Then adding more light grey and repeating but slightly lighter and not covering all the previous step. To make it work with the base of the goblin, I base coated random rocks with Mechanica Standard Grey. And to make it work with the rocks on the hill, I base coated some rocks with Abaddon Black. If you have cheap mid-grey and black, or black and white acrylics, then use them rather than miniature specific paints. Next up was to dry brush the entire piece with Mechanica Standard Grey. And to add more variation, I used Dawnstone on the grey rocks. To finish the rocks, I did a top-down dry brush of Corax White. Once happy with the painting, all that's left to do is base the piece. For this, I use the same technique as I did in the Warrior of Rohan video, using brown Battleground from the Army Painter and PVA Glue, making sure to get in all the gaps. I only covered 2/3 of the base, leaving the outer edge clear. I decided to add some battlefield rocks like I did in the Great Eagles video. Then with a sheet of paper underneath, make sure to cover all of the PVA with brown Battleground. The paper makes it easy to clean up after. For the outer edge of the base, I used Battlefield Grass Green from the Army Painter and applied it in the same way as the brown Battleground. Once dry, the piece is complete and you have a Goblin Lair. If you make one or something similar, then tag me in it on Instagram, or use the hashtag OTRSS, or join my Facebook group and show me what you've been up to on there. I'll leave the link in the description. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe, and if you want to see how I painted the Goblin, then check out this video, or if you want to see another train build, then check this out. See you in the next one.